All right, so in the wake of Amazon workers up in Staten Island successfully organizing the first Amazon union here in the United States, corporate media outlets and pundits have been absolutely shitting and pissing their pants trying to figure out how to talk about this situation while somehow making the union seem terrible and scary, and also making corporate authoritarianism seem like a good thing. So I wanted to check in with some of the latest talking points that we've been hearing. This is from Jim Cramer of CNBC, who has basically his own financial show, and I wanted to get a glimpse of the types of rhetoric that they are deploying in a moment like this. So let's go ahead and hear what he's got to say.
I know that the union work rules are what everything is about. It's the same case with Starbucks too. If you can't tell your employees when they work, then you're really not able to have much of an ability to be able to move product or move coffee. And I think that the unions will be in charge of time that you need to work, and that would be dreadful for very dreadful for Andy Jassy.
And that's just a U.S. picture, right?
Yeah.
They got Europe to think about as well.
Look, one of the problems was, Starbucks does indeed have unionized places in the ones that they franchise, but if you can't control the work rules, no one wants to work certain shifts. So you can just say, listen, I'm not going to work that shift. And Amazon would not be able to say, yes, you must work it. So that's what at stake with union is time that you have to work.
Our thanks to Dee. We're going to watch developments in New York.
We have more on
and
the
Alabama.
tech check?
I imagine we will.
Because she's doing amazing work. This is a very important story because one of the reasons why Amazon works so well is because people work when Amazon says you must work.
Okay, so again, I mean, pretty much the entirety of what he just said was unchecked, unaccountable corporate authoritarianism or capitalist authoritarianism is a good thing, actually. That's what he was just saying there. And listen, this is a guy who CNBC or who they are essentially putting forward as one of their financial experts, one of their, capitalist experts in a situation like this. And these are the talking points that he's using. I mean, they're weak as fuck. I mean, what was he actually just saying there from a logistical perspective? That unions are going to have a greater say in how we determine how, Amazon warehouse shifts are run or how Starbucks shifts are run. I mean, that would be a good thing. Everybody who has ever worked a job like this would recognize how shitty a position it is to have your boss come down and say, no, you know what, tomorrow you have to come in and clock in for the night shift that nobody wants and you don't have any say in the matter. And if you don't do that, then you're fired. That's the model that he thinks is good and working well versus a more democratic model where workers could collectively decide who's going to take what shifts and maybe incentivize some people to take the worst shifts, like a night shift. You could say, okay, Bob or Sally, you're going to go take this night shift and you're also going to get, a $5 bonus for taking this shift. It's like, these are not hard logistical problems to sort out. You just have to think about it for more than 2 seconds. And it's very obvious once you do think about it for more than 2 seconds that having these decisions made in a democratic way or in a more democratic way via a union would be far superior to the model that he's talking about here, which is just completely unchecked and unaccountable authoritarian decision making. And that's exactly the type of capitalist economics that a guy like Jim Cramer supports. So again, you see right through their bullshit talking points, especially when he undercut everything that he just said by pointing out the fact that, this is the first domestic Amazon union here in the United States, meaning Amazon does have unionized workplaces in other parts of the world, meaning they are somehow magically able to still operate a profitable business even while having a union representation for their workers. So it's like, even under the capitalist model that he's talking about here, he's not even making a successful argument because you've already demonstrated that both in the case of Starbucks and Amazon, that they do have unionized workplaces around the world and they're operating perfectly fine. So what is your actual complaint here? Do you think this is going to somehow tank the business model of Amazon or Starbucks? It's completely ridiculous, capitalist talking points that you would expect to hear from a ghoul like this. But he did come out the next day and I guess tried to walk back his statements or portray them in a different light. So let's go ahead and hear what they had to say in response to some of the criticism that they were facing online.
I think Howard's want to work with people and explain why the union may not be the best option. He gave a long speech in Buffalo about it. He's an impassioned guy. He has a level of bearing that few people in the world have. And I think he can really talk about how it's such a great place to work. He'll do a good job.
We got beat up a little bit for our discussion on Amazon on Friday, that we didn't appreciate, I guess, union life and how its importance in American working life.
Well, I belonged to 2 unions in my life, helped lead a wildcat strike. I was ill-advised, by the way. Got a lot of people fired. And my experience is that if you have a union that's adversarial, then you can't protect your people. And I look, unions can be great in this very stressful situation, but Elon Musk doesn't have unionized people, and I think he puts out great product, and I don't see big turnover.
Right.
Okay, so again, he didn't really walk back shit, and honestly, this was just him doubling down on the laziest, anti-union talking points I could possibly imagine. I mean, he's doing the same type of language and rhetoric that you hear from, Amazon directly, or from, CEOs like Howard Schultz that he was talking about there. This is the type of language that they love to use, right? This is when they trot out that, we're just a family, and you wouldn't want some scary third-party union representing you, because we just want to have this relationship with, in the case of Starbucks, they call their employees or their workers partners, right? And so it's like, you're a partner with us, right? Even though you don't have any check to our authoritarian control over your day-to-day life, over your existence as an employee for us, even though we aren't giving you a voice in any real way, shape, or form, you're still just part of this big happy family. So why would you want any sort of, representation or collective bargaining security arrangement where you could actually collectively act to demand certain things? It's like, it's very lazy, but simultaneously somehow effective in a lot of different ways. But again, the type of messaging he's putting forward here is basically that they don't want union representation. Why do they not actually want union representation? Because these corporations know, which is exactly why they're willing to spend millions of dollars on union busting campaigns, they know that a union representation will be a much more effective force than individual workers in fighting for better pay, better conditions, better benefits, etc. So it's very obvious when you see corporate ghouls and capitalist ghouls like Jim Cramer literally on the verge of, it seems like, tears in response to this surging American labor movement, you can see exactly why these types of things would be a good thing, because they're fucking terrified of workers actually being able to engage in that collective action to make demands instead of having to beg for crumbs from a capitalist enterprise that cares about absolutely nothing but, this little bar up on the screen that they have constantly running in the background of shows like this. So, again, you see the ghoulish talking points, but again, they're pretty lazy from a guy who's supposedly a financial expert. It doesn't even seem like he's strongly coming out and making any of the usual anti-union messaging or talking points that I would hear in a strong way. But the funniest part about what he said there was at the end, where he references Tesla. Okay, he references Tesla as a so-called successful company that doesn't have unionization. Okay, a company that famously has one of the highest injury rates in the industry. That as you can see here from the headline from The Guardian, and I'll link all of these down below. But Tesla factory workers reveal pain, injury, and stress. Everything feels like the future but us. So you have Tesla workers who not only are getting abused and exploited in many of their factories here in the United States, but also they just faced a massive lawsuit and are currently facing a massive lawsuit from black employees who are coming forward about rampant discrimination and racism within Tesla factories. And you guys really should go read this entire breakdown, because some of the shit that is happening in these Tesla factories is fucking wild. The degrees of racism and bigotry that some workers are facing, like literally having bosses refer to quartered off black sections of the factory as plantations, and just horrible shit like that. But again, not exactly the type of company who I would be praising as like this perfect model of not having union representation. It seems like a lot of these workers could have benefited substantially from having that union protection that comes along with having that sort of collectivized workforce. But ridiculous example that he would of course throw out there. Because all he cares about, obviously, is what Tesla's stock portfolio looks like. He doesn't care about the conditions of the workers. But in addition to that, he also just can't talk about the actual statistics of any of this. He has to appeal to this broader narrative, because when you do look at the statistics of what unions are able to secure for workers, it's pretty cut and dry. Okay, so I got two different research pieces that were put forward by the Economic Policy Institute. The first one says right to work states still have lower wages. So right to work basically meaning a state that allows workers who otherwise would have had to pay union dues. It allows individual workers to basically deny that they want to be a part of a union in their given workplace, which obviously undercuts the amount of union dues that the union is going to be able to use to have lawyers and to have the ability to fight for collective bargaining agreements, while those same workers, while opting out from having to pay union dues and other things like that, still get the benefits that the union was fighting for. So again, right to work states, it's complete bullshit. As Kyle Kulinski always says, it's right to work for less. And And you see it in the data there. If you live in a right-to-work state, as I do, you are more likely to have lower wages because you don't have the same type of union representation that is actually going out and collectively fighting for those higher wages. And again, just to lay it out here from the EPI, union workers are paid 11.2% more and have greater access to health insurance and paid sick days than their non-union counterparts. And they say policymakers must strengthen workers' ability to form unions, particularly during the coronavirus pandemic. So again, the data is very clear about this. And on the political side of this is where it really just gets even more pathetic, is because I've only seen, like, I could maybe count it on both of my hands, the amount of senators and the amount of members of the House that have come out and openly supported this Amazon labor union, this independent union that was formed. And so it's like, this is the perfect example for Democrats, or the perfect chance for Democrats to put themselves out there first and foremost, and to side with these unions and try to push for legislation like the PRO Act, the Protect the Right to Organize Act, and aggressively stand behind unions and become the party that does actually represent the interests of workers and is fighting for the interests of workers. This is the moment where, if you had a President Bernie Sanders, you could be leaning into that populism and going after a corporation like Amazon and CEO like Jeff Bezos, who's flying off on his dildo rocket to space, and take on this type of economic populist fight. But of course, Democrats are barely doing that. I've only seen, again, a handful of them coming out in support of this, but they're not collectively engaging in this. Why? Because of the same reasons why Republicans are against unions. It's because they represent the United Corporations of America that funnel infinite sums of money into their campaign coffers and protect their entrenched interests and seat in power. So, this is where you see that, a coalition forming between corporate Democrats and the entirety of the Republican Party, where you see this lack of political opportunism, where you could have actually come out aggressively in favor of unions and stood by this unionization attempt and used it to further your own political aims. So, congratulations to the workers for actually successfully organizing this effort with little to no external support or help, either from politicians or from even the more institutionalized larger unions like the RWDSU. So credit to the organizers and the workers for actually getting this shit done in the first place. But you see the type of rhetoric that is being deployed on outlets like MSNBC or CNBC or Fox News. They're all essentially towing the line for corporate America and continuing to try to push this bullshit propaganda that unions are some scary outsider force that is going to do harm to you, instead of being a voice, a representation for workers engaged in collective action to try to make demands for better pay, better benefits, etc.